Now, the Goldilocks rules in and around the Victorian lockdown, they change again at 11:59 tomorrow night. Now, apparently, it's a major issue if you go further than 5 k's from your house tonight, but in about a day and a bit's time, you can go 10 kilometres. In regional Victoria, if you left the house tomorrow, it would be a problem, but you're completely fine from Friday onwards. But perhaps after we were able to get the win today to make sure that regional people won't be held to as tougher rules when it comes to coronavirus lockdowns as Melbourne, now we've got to deal with another load of nonsense, which is why aren't kids in school? They never should have been taken out of school as a result of this lockdown. The cases have never been high enough, and the evidence is overwhelming, endless, and has been clear for a year. The kids don't pass it amongst themselves. They don't pass it to teachers. Teachers don't pass it to the kids. And in a crazy case of if it ever did happen, you don't shut the entire school system down. You close one school where there might be an issue. It's called proportionality. David Limbrick is the common sense man we like to talk to on this show about all things to do with the idiocy of decision making in Victoria. He's the Liberal Democrats upper house member. Now tomorrow at 11:59, by the time Friday kicks around, next week most likely, Year 11, Year 12 kids can go back, but every other kid is apparently not allowed to go to school. David, there's no science behind this. It's just being made up as they go along.
Look, there's been lots of experts have come out over the last few months saying that, keeping children away from school should be an absolute last resort. There's been Lancet articles about the long-term mental health effects of keeping children out of school. And what's interesting this time is that they're letting the year 11 and 12 students go to school, which is good, by the way. But it's actually the opposite of what happened during the last lockdown. Now, they're saying it's an equity issue. And what they mean by that is they don't want big differences in senior student scores between city and country people. Now, during the last lockdown, they didn't let regional senior students go for equity reasons as well, because they might get a better score than the city students that wouldn't be allowed to go to school. So it's this crazy situation. But I mean, the very fact that the year 11 and 12 students are allowed to go to school, from next week, this sort of proves that it is possible to manage the schools and keep them open. Look, anyone that thinks that sacrificing the welfare of children is an acceptable way to manage a pandemic needs to rethink their values and what sort of society that they really are trying to build.
But also, here's the truth, okay? I know this is heresy, not allowed to be said right now, right? And no matter what they want to pump up in their daily press conferences, there were double the number of cases when the Northern Beaches was locked down at the end of last year to what's happening right now, a week after they locked everything down. The number of people who have gone and got tests in the past week is way over 200,000. The positive rate of those is 0.01%. There's only 17 of 79 local government areas in the entire state that actually have coronavirus cases. Of those, Whittlesea is the biggest one with 21 cases. Then the next one, I think, is 9, 7, and then most are 3, 2 and 1. So the idea that there's some sort of mass amount of dust that's kicked up in the air by dropping your kids off at school before 9 o'clock and picking them up at 3 o'clock, it just doesn't make sense, especially when they've said you can move within 10 k's of your house, which would be most people dropping kids off at their local school.
Look, I mean, this comes back to proportionality again. The restrictions that they're coming up with are meant to be proportionate to the risk involved. Now, schools have proven that they're well capable of managing these sort of risks. Schools set up the kiss and go thing so the parents wouldn't go into the school. The kids just jump out of the car and go into the school. Most people, when they drop off the kids to the school, they get in the car, they go there, the kids jump out and they drive home again. There's no interaction with other families or anything like this. The government needs to show how these directions are proportionate, because they still, and I've spoken about this many, many times, they haven't been releasing the underlying science that they're using for this. They haven't been releasing the Human Rights Charter assessments. If the actions and the directions that they're not taking, that they're taking are not proportionate, then they're not legal.
So what's frightening for most people is that seems common sense about what you've just stated, about how over the top that they are, yet for some reason they just barrel on. They just push through. And despite everything that I just said, despite everything you've said, despite all the data that's been shown here, and again, I'm not pretending to be an epidemiologist, but I'm trying to be common sense here, which is we know the difference between what we thought was the blob at the start of 2020 and how to deal with spot fires in 2021. Yet this is still how the acting Premier is talking today.
If we don't do this, this thing will get away. This variant of concern will become uncontrollable and people will die.
I mean, David, how do you compete with any sort of logic with that sort of hysteria?
Well, it's the way that they're talking, it's this fear again. They're trying to induce this fear so that they can get away with their actions that many people don't think are proportionate. I think that the resistance to this is growing and that people aren't really buying it anymore. I mean, my wife is just about ready to go on strike with this home learning thing. And I've had, dozens and dozens of people contact my office already in despair. This is parents about, having to deal with this again. They're worried about the impact on their kids. I mean, people have been saying some of their kids are just saying they're not going to do it anymore. They're just fed up and they've had enough of all this. It's really concerning. And we've heard about all of the terrible, and I was asking the acting Premier himself last week in Estimates Committee about all these impacts. And we know all these terrible impacts on kids. We know about the mental health impacts of removing children from their friends and society. We know the terrible health impacts of keeping children locked up for so long. And maybe they keep talking about the precautionary principle. Well, maybe we should be using the precautionary principle before we start, doing these experiments really on kids. We don't know what the long-term effects are going to be here. And I'm very concerned about what these kids, this, generation lockdown, is going to think about our actions in the future. I mean, are they going to forgive us?
Well, what are they going to become? Agoraphobes, all the rest of it. And remember, we've already seen what the consequences of this thing is remember all the extra money in that Victorian budget to pay for tutors to help get kids back up to speed. Now, I know we're going into school holidays and there's some sort of calculation here to basically stretch it till then, but the consequences, they're very real, and I don't care what the consequences are for pushing back. We will do it, and I'm so pleased we have a man like you on the inside. Thanks so much, David.
Thanks for having me.